but I'm really glad you're here. And we would have had 100 if you had been here last week. I did. Okay, I'm not blaming you. It's just the way it is. This is a wonderful time for me because this is the last Sunday I'll be here for a while, which means I can say whatever I want. And I do want to thank you. A few months ago, I was sitting around with my wife and I came up with an idea of a ministry, and we call it the portable pulpit. And the idea of it was to go to churches that were going through transitions, just simply like you guys were, without a preacher for a while, and just filling in, trying to kind of bridge the gap a little bit, keep the energy up and the enthusiasm up until someone can come and fill that role. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about Overland. So I called Sean and Wendy, and they said, no, we haven't got a preacher yet. And they put a good word in for me, and Dave and Doug were brave enough to say, come on, Brother Dave, and let's see what happens. And I want to thank all those involved in that. This has been a real blessing for me. And it was kind of a confirmation that what I was thinking about, I think it's a real need in the church. A lot of churches are going through those transitions, and it's a hard time. And for whatever reason, a lot of times the attendance goes down and the enthusiasm goes down, and it's just tough. So I want to try to fill that gap. And anyway, that's my goal. I want to thank Dave and Doug again for allowing me to come. I want to thank Pam, our new secretary. I don't know if you realize the church secretary is an incredibly important position. And she's, I think, going to do a great job. She's with it. She's clever. She's got ideas. She's got some enthusiasm. And those things are very important to the success of the church. And I especially want to thank Sean and Wendy. Wendy left, so I couldn't embarrass her while she's gone. She had something she had to do. I've known Sean and Wendy since they were in high school. Sean, I was his preacher, I was his Bible teacher, and I was his football coach. And yes, Sean played football for me. And he just couldn't get away from me. And then Wendy, I taught her a Bible class, and then I was her preacher here. They are just an incredible couple, and I love them very much. And I thank them for forgetting all the dumb things I did over the years and putting in a good word for me. FCAA. I want you to say it with me. We're going to say it 3 times. I know it's kind of rinky-dink and silly, but we're going to do it anyway. And I'm going to try to finish on time. So I'm going to talk fast. Fortunately, I am a Yankee, and I can do that. But say it with me. FCAA. FCAA. F. Now, when I was a little boy, I was doing something that I didn't realize. I didn't have a name for it. I didn't even realize I was doing it. But ever since I can remember, I've had a mantra that I lived by. And there are different ones over different periods of my time. But when I was little, I remember the little story. Remember about the engine that could? The little engine? I think I can. And I remember mowing the yard. Now, when we mowed the yard, now I'm telling you, I'm old. But when we mowed the yard, we had a push mower. And you're all like, well, we do too. No, this push mower did not have an engine on top of it that you put gasoline in. You pushed it. And I remember mowing our yard and thinking, I will never be able to get this done because it was like this. I mean, I was so short, I'm still short, but I remember mowing that yard saying, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And it's kind of silly, but I believed in those kind of things. And that was my mantra when I was a little guy, doing things and trying to do things that I just didn't think I really could, but I kept saying that. I think I can, I think I can. Later on, as I matured, I heard a song. Some of you are probably familiar with the song. It's called The Impossible Dream. And it's kind of amazing because last year at Harding, my grandson sang this song at the opening ceremony of the first chapel at school. But it goes like this: to dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, and to run where the brave dare not go, to right the unrightable wrong, to love pure and chaste from afar, and to try when your arms are too weary, to reach that unreachable star. This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to be willing to fight for the right without question or pause, and to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause. I mean, I believed that. And I remember when I was going through some hard times as a young preacher, I turned that record player. You know, we used to have those lower things called record players. I turned it as loud as I could. The neighbors could hear it. It vibrated the walls. And I was like, we are going to do this. We are going to overcome. Later on, I was sitting in church one time at the 6th and Washington Church of Christ in Marietta, Ohio. And the preacher was preaching and the singer was singing, and the song leader led a song. The song was, "This Is My Task." And it was like God was speaking to me from heaven, and I really mean that. It was a moment that just sent goosebumps down my arms. And here's the words: to love someone more dearly every day, to help a wandering child to find his way, to ponder o'er a noble thought and pray, and smile when evening falls. This is my task. I never actually repented of this, but I tore that page out of the songbook. I folded it, and I was old enough to know you don't tear pages out of the songbook. I folded it and put it in my billfold. I have carried that song all around the world. And then one day I was asked to speak at a youth rally somewhere, and I spoke on, this was my title, I Can, I Will, I Did. And it was the story of David. You remember David the shepherd? I take care of the sheep. David faces the giant. David has a victory. David goes to king, said, I can fight the giant. No, David, you can't fight the giant. You're just a kid. Go back to the sheep. No, I will fight the giant. And what did he do? He does. And then he goes and gets his little stones and goes out there, whoosh, boom. And he stands over the giant Goliath and said, I did. I believed that so much I wrote a book about it. Sold 2 or 3 copies. And now in this older age of my life, I've kind of think that I've tried to put all these things together to make a little more sense and to fit almost any circumstance in life. Faith leads to courage. Courage leads to action. And action leads to accomplishment. And anything in your life, whether it's spiritual or just things that we have in the everyday world. By the way, I don't think anything in the everyday world is not spiritual. I want you to understand that. Faith leads to courage. Courage leads to action. Action leads to accomplishment. Now, the amazing thing about that is that faith leads to courage. Courage leads to action. Action leads to accomplishment. Guess what? Accomplishment leads to greater faith. And so it starts off like this. Faith leads to courage. Courage leads to action. Action leads to accomplishment. Faith leads to courage. I will blast you out if I wanted to. But faith leads to courage. Courage leads to action. Action leads to accomplishment. Until the accomplishment is you do things beyond your wildest dream. Because you took those baby steps when you were saying faith leads to courage. In Romans chapter 11, it says, now faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you do not see. I like that. Faith is believing. It's like seeing it happen. It's like, I know it's going to happen. It's so real to me. That's faith. Now, in Mark chapter 9, verses 4 through 29, it's the first time I ever preached this sermon. This is the example that I used. Now, think about this particular story. This happens right after the transfiguration. Jesus is on the mountain. It's one of the highlights of his earthly lifetime. He's up there, and it's such a glorious occasion. He comes down off the mountain. He comes back to his followers, and they're having this crowd, and they're having this big discussion, and Jesus comes up and says, what's going on? And this man speaks up and said, I brought you my son. He has fits, and he falls to the ground, and he foams at the mouth. And I brought him to be healed. But they couldn't do it. Faith. Faith. To bring out his son. This was a time in history that children with problems like that could be exterminated. And if they weren't exterminated, even in our lifetime in history, they were hidden away. You want anybody to see your child with an imperfection. This man had great faith and great courage to bring him out into the public, not knowing what might happen. And you know what happened? The worst thing happened. He has one of his seizures. He brought his son. He took action. He did the only thing he knew to do. Jesus says to him, everything is possible for him who believes. I love this man because I have been in his shoes so many times. I believe. But help my unbelief. I'm being honest with you, Jesus. I believe, but I don't believe enough. I'm doubtful. Jesus says to this spirit, I command you to come out of him and never enter again. Faith leads to courage. Courage leads to action. Action leads to accomplishment. Can you imagine how that man felt when he walked away from that crowd with his son walking beside him? Maybe they were hand in hand. Maybe he had his arm around his son's shoulder, and he knew his son would never again fall to the ground and foam at the mouth. A lot of times I hear people say, I need greater faith. And I'm here to tell you this man is an example. You do not need greater faith. You need to act on the faith that you have. I think there's 3 kinds of faith that we need. Okay, I lied to you. We're not going to finish on time. But I'm not going to hesitate. I'm going on. I won't be back. But I think there's 3 kinds of faith that we need. Number 1 is faith in God. Hebrews tells us, chapter 11, without faith, it is impossible. And I know what the rest of the verse says, but without faith, it is impossible. We need faith in God. And that verse, that chapter is so faith-building because it goes on over and over and over again, and it makes the same statement. By faith, by faith, by faith. By faith, Abraham was told to go to a place, and God said, I'll tell you when you get there. By faith, Moses led his people. By faith, the walls of Jericho falls down. Faith, courage, action, accomplishment. We need to trust in God. And God has demonstrated over and over and over that he's got us. I love T-shirts, and I love reading T-shirts. Sometimes it's you read it and you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't read that. But one of the kids at our school, he's got one, he says, God's got you. I love that. I asked him if it came in double XL, and he said, I don't know, I don't know. But we also have to have faith in humankind. We are bombarded every day with the most horrific negative stories about human beings. I told you before, I can't watch Good Morning America. It's almost always an attack on leaders, whoever they are. I'm not talking about just politics. It's almost always an attack on the good. It's almost always showing us the absolute worst in humankind. Why would God care about us if we are really that bad? We need to have faith in mankind because God has faith in mankind. In Psalm, he says, what is man that thou art mindful of him? And he repeats it in Hebrews. We need to share the good. There's another T-shirt I like. You've probably all seen it. Be the good. Be the good. See the good. Speak the good. Why should we believe in mankind? Because they were made in the creation of God, in the image of God and the creation of God. And God said, I love my creation. I believe in mankind, and I hope I will go to my grave having a positive attitude about you. But we also have to believe in ourselves. Faith in ourselves. Back in the 70s, there was a phrase that I really loved, and we kind of stopped using it. These phrases go in and out. But there was a preacher, his name is G.P. Holt. He's a black preacher from Indianapolis, Indiana. And I heard him speak one time, and I'll never forget. It wasn't his phrase, but I don't know where he got it, but he used it very effectively. And I remember him preaching, and he pointed at the audience and said, God don't make no junk. People try to put you down. They try to cause you to doubt. And sometimes you mess up. But you should believe in yourself. Now, there's a verse in the Bible that says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And we like that verse. Would you repeat it with me? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Now I want you to do something else. I want you to repeat the verse with me, but I want you to say, for God so loved me. Okay? For God so loved me. Now I'm going to take it up a little notch. I want you to put your name in there. For God so loved Dave. I'll be honest with you, there's some days, especially in the past, that I've had to get up and stand in front of a mirror and look at that mirror and say, God loves you, Dave. And maybe you need to do the same. But faith leads to courage. What is courage? Courage is just doing something that you are fearful of. I can remember the day that I went to the dentist as an adult person without taking a Valium. I am terrified of the dentist. I ripped the arm off of a dentist chair one time and handed it to him on my way out the door. I went to the dentist one time and started hyperventilating. They were running around. They got me a sack to breathe in. I went to the dentist one time, and one of my former students was the dental hygienist, and here's this little twerp kid that I had patting me on the chest and saying, breathe, breathe, Mr. Meller, breathe. You are really afraid, aren't you, Mr. Meller? That's silly, but it's true. I remember going to my wife when I was preaching one place, and the elders had asked me to do the almost unforgivable for the elders to ask a preacher to do, preach on contribution. And I went to my wife and I said, I don't feel real comfortable about this if we don't increase ours. And she said, do you know how much goes out of our house? I said, no, you take care of all that. I don't have any idea. But I think we ought to increase our contribution. Faith leads to courage. Courage leads to action. It's courageous to invite someone to church. It's courageous to speak your truth. I remember Susan came home one day when we lived here, and she was working at a company in town. And there was a lady in the company that had gotten pregnant. She had 2 children, and they just could not afford to have a 3rd children. And the other people in the office were saying, well, you ought to get an abortion. You can't afford another kid. You don't need to. You just ought to get an abortion. Later that afternoon, that lady came to Susan and she said, I know you believe in God and all that. What do you think? She did not get an abortion. My wife had the courage to speak her truth. But courage leads to action. David with his stones, Moses with his staff, Goliath with his strength, Peter standing up and preaching after denying Christ, Paul being baptized into the Christ that he had so much persecuted. In James it says, be ye doers of the word and not hearers only. It goes on in that same chapter. It says, but without your faith without works is dead. And he says, show me your faith by your works. I like the way Jesus put it. Matthew chapter 25. Jesus said, I can just hear him saying this. I tell you the truth. Whatever you did, whatever action you took for the least of these, you did it for me. And then accomplishment. One of the proudest moments I ever had was when I went home one time. My father was preaching. My father did finish high school, but I don't think he was a very good student. He came back from the war. He was messed up. He didn't become a Christian until he was in his mid-30s. He was a very angry person dealing with an awful lot of stuff that happened in the Philippines on an island during a war. Went home to go to church. They announced that Brother Miller was going to be preaching. And my heart skipped a minute because I thought, oh, I didn't know they wanted me to preach. How arrogant. My sweet, humble dad gets up and walks up to the podium and preaches. God is good. So remember, faith leads to courage. Courage leads to action. Action leads to greater faith. It's not how much faith you have, but it's acting upon the faith that you have. So what will God do with Overland? With your new preacher? First of all, you know, and I'm going to tell you, it ain't the preacher that's going to make this church grow. He's an important part. Don't misunderstand me. I'm a preacher, and I think my role in the church is important. But what are you going to do? In your personal life, if you're struggling with faith, we can pray with you. If there's something that you know you want to do, but you're afraid, we can pray with you. If you're about to take action, we will stand behind you. We want to see your accomplishment because it gives us greater faith. If you need to come, do so as we stand and sing.